Yes, folks, New Zealand is going through a very dark period at the moment. Far-left radicals are taking over our country, led by Jacinda Ardern. They are ripping our democracy apart. But to be fair, this began long before Jacinda Ardern. It began with John Key when he ignored 87% of New Zealanders who voted to repeal Sue Bradford's radical anti-smacking law in a referendum a few years back. Now, folks, it's time for us to rethink binding referenda again as a way for us to veto bad legislation. The gun grab is the case in point. Have a listen to this.
Now, last night I was sent a message by someone up Auckland, and message was Dewi De Boer of Right Minds up in Auckland, which is classed in New Zealand as a far-right group, and the media are calling them a far-right group, which is completely untrue. All this group does is basically they believe in freedom of speech, and they believe in preserving New Zealand as it is, and they do not want mass migration from the third world. That's all it is to Right Minds. And anyway, Dewi De Boer, he's quite big in this movement, and it's not a really big movement, to be fair. I have met him. I met him quite a few months ago up in Auckland when I went up there to give a speech.
Yeah, I actually met him as well.
In the park in Auckland. Anyway, now the police raided his home. Now Saturday today, and I think it was on Thursday, and over half a dozen police came in through Dewi's front door and round the back of his house, and they even called for backup. Now these police were armed. Now I believe it was just sidearms they had, and they were looking for a rifle that Dewi had, and it was a .22 Winchester type rifle.
Yeah, so anyway, let's find out a bit more about this story. Yes, so Auckland far-right activist house raided over suspected illegal firearm. Armed police have left empty-handed after raiding the home of a far-right activist who they suspected of having an illegal firearm. So this is Dewey here. It was one of the first police actions targeting firearm owners since the amnesty to hand in recently outlawed guns and equipment ended last month. In an article posted to Right Minds New Zealand website, the site's co-founder Dewi De Boer said he was home with his wife and 3 young children when half a dozen armed police officers swarmed through his front door while others ran around the side of the house. So let's just click this link here. Now this is their website, so I'll just read about and go down to the bit that's important. Right Minds New Zealand is a broad church right-wing movement for New Zealand conservatives, libertarians, traditionalists, capitalists and nationalists, people who share our Christian values, believe in personal responsibility and want to see government play a lesser role in our lives. We are not really big fans of leftists, globalists, cronyists, fascists, communists and social justice warriors. So anyway, we'll now go back to their article. Guys, I've actually posted a link to this article in the description below. So we have husband and wife and 3 children. Oh yes, they look like real far-right activists to me. My house was raided over a .22 LR lever-action rifle. On Thursday evening, I was just finishing up dinner with my 2 oldest kids. My wife was feeling unwell and feeding our 4-week-old baby in bed. I had just gotten the ice cream out for the kids when the doorbell rang. I opened the door to see a number of police officers outside. They served me with a search warrant under Section 6 of the Search and Surveillance Act 2012. Half a dozen armed police officers swarmed in the front door, holstered sidearms only, as several more ran around the sides of the house. They later called for more backup. Wow, more backup, as the house was larger than your average state house drug lab. I got the impression that they had never had to raid a middle-class suburban house like mine before. Everyone on the property was detained, read their rights, and questioned separately. I opted to call a lawyer who advised me to refuse to answer any questions. Good advice, I think. The warrant claimed they had reason to believe I was in possession of a prohibited magazine fitted to a .22 RL lever-action rifle, blue metal, brown wooden stock. The officer told me I had posted about it online, which I had, in my public written submission against the Firearms Amendment Act passed last year. That submission was shared on several blogs and social media. I had used the firearm as an example to prove the legislation was not targeting military-style assault weapons, as the media, Prime Minister and her cabinet repeated ad nauseum. The vast majority of firearms affected by the legislation were just like mine. Yes, just like this. Now, this is a common gun for farmers to use for shooting rabbits, etc. They're either lever action like this or pump action. And they can hold about maybe 10 to 15 bullets in this tube here. Yeah. They're not even semi-automatic, and they're now banned because they can hold more than 10 bullets. This gun is not a gun a person like Brenton Tarrant would ever consider using. Anyway, let's see what kind of guy Dewey DeBoer is.
It is 9 p.m. here in Auckland, and we are live on the Right Minds NZ YouTube channel, and possibly also live on the BFD, although I couldn't quite get a check on that. And we're still just sharing the links around, and I see some people are filtering in the chat into the chat already, so that's good to see.
Now, obviously, when we went to air last week, the White Island volcano eruption had occurred the previous day. So since then, there has been a lot more confirmation on the fatalities and injuries. The bodies have now been able to recovered from the island, and it's just a really tragic natural disaster.
It is. very tragic event, and our condolences to the families of all of those affected by this. And there was no warning for it, and there still has been no report that they could have provided adequate warning. Of course, it was an active volcano, and so people should have been aware of the risks there. But it happened so quickly, and they did not see it coming. We weren't fully aware of the number of fatalities last week, and the body count has climbed considerably since they've found located bodies, or a number of people have died in hospital with horrific burns. So the body count now stands at 18.
Yeah, can you see any sign of danger with this guy? Is this guy going to shoot someone? Yeah, anyway, I'll just fast forward to a bit about the gun grab.
Speaking of money and handing out tons of money, we are entering the final week, or have entered the final week of the buyback, as it's called. So the gun confiscation program that Jacinda kicked off after banning all centerfire semi-automatics and a whole bunch of other guns in April is now coming to a close. And if you would open up the link or put it up on the screen. Let's see, I've got one. The police website have a statistics page that shows you just how many have been handed, and people can have a little look at that while I go over these numbers. See that the 43,000 of those, it's nearly 44,000 of those have come from the buyback. Another 4,000 have simply been handed in for nothing. So they've given a break. So they've said, okay, cool, we've collected 47 or so thousand firearms, and you can run the numbers on that. Where you're like, well, how many semi-automatics are there in New Zealand? And it's estimated there's around 200,000 to 240,000 semi-automatics in New Zealand. So if we pick the lower number there, 200,000, you compare that to the 47,000, and then you think, that doesn't quite add up, does it? With 3 days to go, that's a lot of firearms that are missing. So at best they're looking at 25%. But it gets a little bit worse if you're looking at those graphics, because you have to exclude the 4,000 that they haven't paid for, and then they've got a price list where they state that only 64% of the firearms bought were centre-fire automatics, because Jacinda's firearms legislations affected anything larger than a 10-round magazine. So people's lever actions, all kinds of people's pump-action shotguns, people's 22 caliber rifles that were over 100 years old, that had tube magazines. All of these firearms were affected. So many people just chose to sell those back to the government for a nice price, where they could make a little bit of money off of those. And so only 64% were the centre-fire semi-automatics that they claimed that they were banning in the first place. So that brings your number down to, and so I don't have to do math live on the air, I'm just going to read this off here. So that brings you down to about 28,000 centre-fire semi-automatics. So that's about 14% of the centre-fire semi-automatics that are in New Zealand that have been bought back by the government. So all of the effort they've put into this, and they've paid, the price is on that list. Was on that list that you had up, but I'll get rid of the numbers. 90 million. So they spent 90 million on this to get back 14% of the semi-automatics, and the
Yes, they've wasted $90 million to get back 14% of the so-called dangerous guns out there. Yes, this gun grab was terrible legislation. It took guns away from good law-abiding citizens. Now that could have been stopped with a binding citizens-initiated referendum, similar to what the Swiss do. Now, the New Conservatives want to do this, but they really need to explain it a lot better than they are doing at present.